guys have dropped off the screen, which means, Phil, you and I are probably live, and we are recording.
Great.
So I'm going to welcome you and welcome all of our viewers. I'm Peter Reinhardt. Welcome to Pizza Talk, and I'm here today with Philip Korshak, who many of you who have been following the Pizza Quest story may remember from the interview that we did a few years ago. It's been like 4 years, I think, Phil, since we had,
right.
for me, a phenomenal sort of intense interview. With I felt like I had to run at full speed to keep up with you because you were just I just loved the well, I call it the free association jazz style of thinking and living. You are really a musician and an artist at heart. Some of you who know Phil will know him from his days at Home Slice Pizza in Austin, Texas, which is where you were when we first met. We did that great tour and we did the interview. And then all of a sudden I saw you like at Pizza Expo one year, and then I didn't see you the next year and kind of lost touch. Somewhere along the line, I heard you were in Minneapolis. Right. And then I got out of the blue, got a note from you saying you were in my old hometown, Philadelphia, old Philly, South Philly, in fact, in the Italian market neighborhood. And so it's been a long journey, a long journey, and very exciting. You're about to open a new bagel shop, Korshak's Bagels, which I can't, wait to. In fact, my brother who lives in Philly is, I think, going to be on your tasting panel now because he's very jazzed about it. So with all that said, can you give us a little bit of a catch up? And for those who didn't see the interview, just share your journey. I'm going to let you go and let you riff for a while. Because,
right on.
And if I see a place to jump in, I will. But otherwise, I'm just going to let you go for it.
Awesome. Well, I mean, first of all, Pete, thanks. It is.
Been looking forward to this.
Me too. It is always a pleasure to sort of come in contact with you in a corporeal way. In that it is true that with almost every recipe I pull down or whoever I'm talking to, you're there in the conversation, and that's it. It's sort of like a charm or sort of like a keepsake or, sort of like a talisman, but it is a piece of language that almost every baker I know goes to. And I don't know anybody who holds to any of your recipes in sort of like a devout, constitutional law, nothing changes kind of way. I think that's the beauty of it. Everybody I know has this skeleton, this brontosaurus that you dug up and went, hey, look at this. And then everybody I know goes into it. And so it's real nice just to, talk to you. And one of the memories that fits for me that is really beautiful was that it was our friend John Arena who directed you towards the store, which is, and John likewise is this, powerful sort of energy running through the universe.
Yeah. And
the thing that he pointed you to was this cheesecake that I'd been making since I was 14.
Yeah.
That an illustrator who worked for my father made for a Christmas party, and I tasted it, and it blew me away. And it blew me away, not like it was the best thing I had ever eaten. It made time sort of stop. It was one of the first things I'd eaten where I had to reconsider almost everything because of how it exceeded my expectation of what the thing could be, right? And I talked to her and I said, I want to do that. Mm-hmm. And she went, look, I can teach you how to do it, but if you're just coming in to play in the kitchen, go somewhere else. Yeah. I mean, this is really a pretty serious thing that is happening, because what you're going to do is you're going to feed somebody. The thing that you're making is going to end up inside of somebody. Yeah. So you really have to take it seriously. And I went, yeah, I'm serious. Let me do it. And she took me into the kitchen. I just one of the first adults to really. She treated me like an adult, like a responsible human being, and walked me through this recipe. And that's the cake that I fed you. Yeah. Right?
How old were you when you were first learning this?
14.
Yeah, okay, great.
And been making the cake ever since. And so, and it is sort of like the language of that cake which is love and respect and care, right? Which is the thing that Arena is really talking about all
Yeah.
the time.
All the time. Yeah.
Which is why it makes sense that Arena would eat that cake and go, oh, okay, right, right, and then get to you and go, okay, like the kid makes pizza and their dough is good and they do a New York style thing that's pretty awesome and there is nothing like home slice pizza and I will shout to the stars about that. But there's something about that cake.
Yeah.
And so then I get to meet you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
He told me, he said, because he knew I was going to Austin for, I was going to teach a class there at Central Market. And he said, when you're there, you've got to go over to Home Slice and meet Phil Korshak. He said, you guys are going to really hit it off.
and exactly, right? And so in meeting you, it's the sort of freedom to be able to talk about the thing, which is passion, right? The thing that you do that it is an end within itself because it feeds others, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not be crazy while you're talking to it. To be able to connect to another human being who goes, right, exactly. That is what rain feels like, right?
Yeah.
It's reifying.
Yeah.
And throughout the entire time I was making bagels. And the lucky thing was while I was working pizza and really beginning to understand dough and being so lucky that every pizzaiolo I reached out to was completely open with their recipe and their method and held nothing back and wanted nothing but success for everybody. I mean, for everybody. And I don't know whether it's like the way that Tony Gimignani lays the rudder into the water, right? Or whether he is the keel that everybody sort of goes, okay, cool, that's how we do it, right? Or whether it is the just beautiful humility of Bianco with what he does and how huge it is on scale. And yet for him, it comes back down to the statement to me, which was, yeah, I really hope you dig my tomato.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, because that's at the root, that's what it is. And being able to do that, the passion of bagels was about me and my father and my mother and the fact that they lived in New York and that my father really identified as a Jewish man with bagels, and my wife and I, when we lived in New York, having a bagel shop that we loved, and then you end up in Texas and there are no bagels. And you go, all right, so I can make things. People make things, right? And I was lucky enough that I was working pizza dough at the same time, and the hydrations are close.
So were you actually making bagels at Home Slice?
No, I was making bagels on the side.
Oh, just for fun, yeah. Okay.
It was like working out as a orchestra musician and then having a weird punk rock band on the side. That's what was happening with me.
Secret life.
Yeah, exactly. And like pizza, what I found out was that it wasn't easy. It was easy if you wanted to make a mediocre thing.
Yeah.
That looked like the thing, right? But to get past that, to get to the plateau where really it was the understanding and being in tandem with the dough, was the end. Not I can make a thing that looks like a thing. It is that I can work and be in context with the dough as it moves, right? And that's where all the help that you've given long fermentation and cold fermentation comes into play.
Yeah.
Right? And it is, to me, a tremendous lesson about how to approach life, which is commonly anxious and beyond your control, right? So with dough, there are things you can control, but they're greatly outweighed by the things that you can't, right? The wildness of yeast is a beautiful kind of entropy. Okay, so what you have to do, what I found for me, was I have to trust the process of the dough over time and understand that my expectation in the moment while I'm making the biga, right, will be different than 2.5 days later when I'm pulling the boiled bagel out. Being trapped in the idea 2.5 days beforehand of what I want it to be.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so that doesn't stay with just the bagel, right? Like that's everyday life where I get caught in this expectation that is based upon variables that are going to shift. Can you learn to shift with it? Can you learn to be inside of a flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Totally self-serving. But it worked with pizza dough for sure.
I was going to say, everything you just described about your bagel, you could apply to the journey with pizza dough. Yeah.
And
in fact, I remember at Home Slice seeing, I don't know, dozens and dozens and dozens of dough boxes stacked up in different rooms at different stages. And you were working, I don't know, 3-4 days ahead on
we were at a 72-hour,
all these different stages of the process, which is kind of cool because it's like a time capsule of each one.
It was remarkably cool, and it was the coolest because it took a huge operation of human beings to get that to be organic and flow, right? And so it took a whole lot of people who weren't really versed that deeply in dough, becoming very versed in dough.
Yeah.
Because they would continue to see it.
You were telling me this guy is, you're telling me which of the guys that were like getting it. They were like coming into an understanding, and it was part of the joy was watching them grow in it.
It is so wonderful. There is so the joy of eureka, a eureka moment for yourself.
Yeah.
For me, is better when I witness somebody else's eureka moment. Because I was there, or because I had something to do with shifting something where it became visible.
Yeah.
But seeing somebody understand.
Yeah. See that light go on and flip the switch and suddenly they see it.
Right. And like heavy-handed or not, it is like shepherding the dough, right? So ultimately, you make the call on the proof before you boil the bagel or before you put the bread in the oven or whatever. I mean, ultimately, you look at it and go, okay, now. And then you do the thing and you put it in the oven and you cross your fingers and you hope and you see how it goes. And same thing, standing behind your oven with your hands behind your back because you can't trust yourself not to open the oven door and ruin the heat, and watching the dough do the thing, right? And begin to gain color is miraculous and wonderful and fulfilling, and more importantly, in the big life lesson, doesn't need you poking at it at that point, right? Like that's a super duper good lesson, at least for a cat like me.
Yeah, I remember a famous chili competition chef told me one time that you don't want to stir the pot. He said you just don't want to mess with the pot when it's in process.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's where it happened with me for bagels. And I mean, like I wasn't currently, so this.
There it is. We turn it a little bit so we can, there we go. Yeah.
That came out of the oven this morning. All right. So dig this. You see that crumb?
Yeah.
It is so amazingly squishy.
Yeah.
And that's the skin, right?
Yeah.
And that's the dough. And the delineation between those textures, years, right? Years of seeing what would happen with the biga or with the longer rise or where it was going to be, how long before I start the boil. Where is the temperature variant of 25 degrees important? Yes, it is, right? I mean, like all that stuff.
All right, so what I want to do is we're going to run out of time soon in this segment, but in the second segment, I want to talk really dial down and drill down on the bagel itself that
You
you've
got
been
it.
working with. But let's fill in the gaps in between for the next couple minutes before we run out of time.
You got
Uh,
it.
Starting at Home Slice, just to give some context for folks who have never been there.
Yeah.
You weren't making like 200 pizzas a day. You guys were cranking them out. How many? I know it was a slice shop, so you were measuring them partly in slices. But how many pizzas a day were you guys creating there?
It was a slice shop, a dine-in shop, and a takeout shop.
You had a full menu too, yeah.
Yeah, all rolled, 3 ovens rocking at the same time. At the end of a week, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of like 1,100 slices, and on top of that, another 5,000 pizzas in a week. It was it was over 1,000 pies a day.
Yeah.
If you took slices and pole pie.
That's what I remember. Yeah.
Knocked them together.
And you had like these different venues, like a shop next to a shop, where you go here for the slice, go here for the pie, go here to sit down and get a full meal.
The dine-in location, which is the original, is still one of the most romantic, beautiful spaces I've ever seen. Home Slice, and they've since expanded to a third, and I think they're in Houston now as well.
Really?
Which all they're doing is spreading love, like every time. They're amazing.
Austin itself has, which was it was not really a pizza, epicenter, has become a very hot pizza city. And they got all the different styles there now and everything. But Austin is a hip city anyway, so it's going to happen.
It is the pizza community in Austin, the food community in Austin is lovely. But simply, like, I'll shout out the Hunt brothers for their Detroit style. In Austin is like one of the original outside of Detroiters that happened. And the way they've run it all the way through has been legit and dedicated to their people and to the community. And they're
is that via
313. Yeah. And like they recently did a combo with Bufalina, which does that Neapolitan. I mean, like they're great.
Yeah.
After Home Slice, I ended up in Minneapolis.
Because, that's what I want to hear about. This sort of the pilgrimage continues.
Yeah, Home Slice was expanding, and I was at a place where I wasn't really interested in how big it was getting and what my role would be in being sort of a commander, like a big Patton style person. Because I am much more comfortable being the weird guy on the weird boat, sailing the weird pirate thing. That's that's just more my vibe. And so I started looking around to think about where I could do bagels where it would make sense. And I drove around, and I ended up in Minneapolis because it has this great Northern European sky, and the Northeast neighborhood of Minneapolis is cool and bohemian and industrial, and that great chef Ann Kim is in Minneapolis with Young Joni and Hello Pizza and Pizzeria Lola. And she's
a great bakery city too. I mean, some fabulous artists, bakers there, and really, the heartland of America. That's where General Mills and Pillsbury and all those companies, all the big mills, all started there. It's a mill city.
You look out your window to see the big gold medal neon sign. Oh, my heart! Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I mean, like the Minneapolis was great, but I wasn't really prepared for snow being on the ground for 8 months. Like that's a long time not to see the ground.
Yeah.
Bundling
that's like living in the Pacific Northwest and not seeing the sun.
Yeah, it just didn't quite click for me, which was really sad because all the friends that I made in Minneapolis are amazing humans and warm and kind and giving, and I miss them. But I ended up in Philadelphia because a pal of mine had grown up around here. She'd been overseas for a decade or more, and wanted to reconnect with her family. Minneapolis wasn't quite working out, and I'd been through Philadelphia I'd really hit, but I figured, all right, well, I'm going to try. It's close to New York. That makes me happy.
Right.
And then I got here and was living in the Italian market across from a live chicken market and fell in love. I mean, just fell in love with the fact that it is a walking city, that there are tons of little shops, that Philadelphia loves above all things the independent maker. Like, and understandable. It goes back a couple hundred years, you know, like it's got history.
Yeah.
And the multiculturalism is amazing. But I met Danny DiGianpietro at Angelo's Pizza on 9th and Fitzwater.
Yeah.
And Danny and I met and just clicked. And Danny says this thing about what he wants with his dough is he wants to see the violence in the dough. He wants the dough reacting like a volcano. And I learned so much from working with him for how he would come at recipes. And that was great. And while working with him, I was able to push out bagels, you know, every so often until he got too busy. And my bagels blew up. I mean, I would give them away on the, you know, like in front of my house.
When you say blew up, you mean blew up in a popular sense, or
yeah,
so
I mean, like it
taken off.
through Instagram. There became like 20 or 30 people who sort of had bagels and loved them.
Yeah.
And then it became sort of wildfire. And then I got written up in Philly Magazine. And then I got written up somewhere else. And the truth is,
you got written up for the bagels in Philly Magazine? Even before you had opened. You haven't really, your shop hasn't opened yet.
Yeah, I'm 2 months away.
It's just on the verge of opening. Well,
yeah.
Well, now that you're in Philly and you're in the heart of the sort of the Italian market area with by Angelo's and some of the great, you know, all those great cheese companies, all that stuff. Let's come back in our next segment and really like focus on Philly and on bagels and on the sort of the method that you've come up with, you know, the consolidation of all these different phases of your life to converge in. Hold that bagel up one more time. That holy bagel right there, the holy bagel that we're
not
going
only that one.
Oh my God, yeah, serious bagel. I mean, all right, we're going to come back with Phil Korshak in the next segment on Pizza Talk. Please join us then, Phil. We're going to continue this in part 2. See you in a couple minutes.
In a bit.
Are we recording? Yeah, we are recording. We're back. We're back with Philip Korshak. He's in South Philadelphia, on the verge of opening Korshak's Bagels. After a journey through the pizza world, now we're going to talk about consolidating the lessons that you brought in and, you know, your culinary journey. But of course, you're always weaving in your life lessons. Yeah. But more importantly, let's get real zeroed in on that bagel. Can you hold that bagel up one more time?
You bet.
Bagels that you have those beautiful, those gorgeous bagels, and the vision that you have for the bagel shop itself. You know, what's behind it, and you know, a little bit about your methodology, because not everybody makes bagels the way you're making.
No, it wasn't until I hit Philadelphia that all the points came together. So at this point, it starts with a Biga that runs at least a 12-hour, and the Biga is built from my sourdough starter, Helen Mirren, who I built Helen.
That's the name of your starter?
Yeah, it's Helen because she's got a mouth like a sailor and legs for days. I built Helen out of all-Trump high gluten, Austin tap water, the peel off of green apples, and the yeast in the backyard in Austin. And it took her about 3 months to develop legs. And once she did and had the flavor that, you know, was her, that I knew directly it was Helen. So Helen, when I was driving around the country trying to figure out where I was going to live, absolutely seat belted into the passenger seat next to me, and I fed her everywhere. I took a piece of her into St. Viateur in a little like bottle, right? So I could stand inside of that shop with the lid off while I waited for stuff.
So you were picking up organisms everywhere.
Everywhere I could. And that's in the Biga for everyone, right? The Biga goes 12 hours.
So when you refer, just for terminology's sake, when you say Biga, you're referring to sort of the starter, the final starter that's going to go into the final dough.
Exactly, right. So it is really the final dough, less about half the flour, a little less than half the flour, and the salt.
I see. So it's a stage. You go from a mother starter,
Yep.
from Helen,
Right.
to a biga, which
Yep.
is sounds more like a wet spongy type dough.
That's
And then
right.
and you ferment that, and then you bring the final build.
Right. And the reason I got to that spongy ferment was to get that.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So that was part of figuring out where I wanted that biga to be more spongy and have a deeper hydration or a lower hydration, was to get that, right?
Yeah. So then you showed us visually what that looks like. Can you also describe a little bit about the
Yeah.
taste quality when you bite? What is it that the mouthfeel that you're getting?
So there's really two major things happening with the inner crumb of the dough. There is the fact that it springs back,
Uh-huh.
works the mouth as well, right? So it is soft in the way that cake is soft, but the bounce back works the taste buds as well, right? So, but that for me, in context of what happens with the tear on the skin,
And yeah,
where it is, I mean, like I always say, like leather,
like
or
that
like
exactly.
the best jerky you've ever had, right?
What kind of flour do you use for this?
So currently I'm using a Hummer, which is Advanti flour, I think, but it's running at about a 14% protein.
High protein flour.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally high protein. And so I want a crunch with a tear, with a spring, because in the flavor, in that there's the sourdough mother with a high acid, there is amber beer malt in there too, which is laying down sort of a base. I mean,
So
like
you're using like a crystal malt, a powder that you add?
I do. So I use a diastatic dry malt, and
Okay.
instead of
Like
liquid.
a lot of bagel shops use the liquid
Yeah.
malt syrup, but you're going with the crystal,
And
which is kind of how I started when I first started making bagels. That's what I used as the crystal like that. Yeah.
I use it because the waste on the liquid is too much for me. It bothers me too much about how much of it is just gone,
Yeah.
and how, the necessity for more plastic also bums me out. The malt is in there, and I also use maple syrup to get a higher sweetener in there too, to get the yeast moving super fast, to get the aeration that will give me the sponge, right? So the problem is with that extra sugar from the maple, the speed on the dough has to then have a lower hydration so it can contain. So this dough bagel is like at a 57% hydration. If I were at 60, even 60, with the speed on the yeast, it would blow out.
So 57 is a pretty stiff dough. I mean, you're working that mixer pretty hard to get that to come together.
Absolutely. So the mother goes to the biga then goes to the dough. The dough gets cut down, formed. I do the poke and not the proper old school tie.
So you poke through and just kind of like a bracelet, you kind of
yeah, and the reason I poke is I can get the better blowhole, the little itty bitty hole, better with the poke than with the tie. When I do the tie, that center hole is always bigger than I want it to be.
Interesting.
And for a style that I want,
it's breaking up just a little bit here with
the
Zoom. Can you just repeat what you just said? The Zoom kind of got in the way of that.
Yeah. So with the bagel, I want it to be able to work as a bagel that you just eat, or a bagel and a schmear, or a bagel sandwich.
Yeah. So you don't want to have a giant hole. You want a small little.
Right. And it also, the size of the hole will sort of define what the texture of the inside dough will be. Right. So the smaller the aperture, the better the spring.
What's the weight of that piece of dough?
4.5 ouncer.
Okay, so it's a good full-size bagel.
Yep.
Yeah. And
then
no yeast, only starter, just natural starter, no commercial yeast at all?
No, there is a like a 0.03% commercial yeast
Spike,
in there too.
little spike of yeast.
Yeah, to get it just really moving and getting that. Again, it's for me to get the spring.
Yes.
If I lowered it and let it go longer, then I would get more of that classic bread honeycomb crumb, which is great if I want bread, but if I want a bagel.
Exactly. It's a different thing altogether. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they go another 12 hours at least after the cut, the form, and then they do a 12-hour cold ferment before. They do about a half hour outside proofing and then into the boil.
Wait, so let me go back again. So after it comes off the mixer, do you go immediately to dividing off the mixer? Did you say there's some fermentation time?
I give it about a 10-minute bench rest after it comes out of the mixer to get it to relax so that when I cut it down to ball, the ball works better.
And then after that, you're just hand forming all the bagels at that point. So in addition to the fact that you've added maple syrup, you know, and some real malt, some real like beer malt. So you don't have your low cost lender's bagel here. You've got an artisan bagel with handcraft involved.
There's a lot going on. That's for sure. Yeah, and the part that is important for me. So with the shop that will open in September on 10th and Morris, across from Verallo Bakery.
Yeah, I'm taking note of that. 10th and Morris in South Philly.
10th and Morris in South Philly. Korshak Bagels. We will hand form every bagel. We hope to do somewhere in the neighborhood of like 600-700 bagels a day.
So you're gonna need a couple other hands in the shop besides your own, because
that's the point.
Yeah,
that's right. That's exactly right. So if
they got ensemble
forming all the bagels, that's no fun, right?
Yeah.
Back to people, witnessing people have eureka. You know this, when you stand around a mixing table, forming dough with human beings, that connection, there's nothing like that connection, right?
In fact, there's a quote that you gave me in our first interview. It was a Carl Jung quote. You happen to remember it because I could bring it up, but it was something about when two personalities interact, it's like chemicals coming together. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
I can bring it up and read it if you want me to.
Sounds like me.
Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, I'm gonna. But let's see, where did it go? Here we go. Okay, I've got it here. It's well, as I'm scrolling through the interview, I'm seeing Ella Fitzgerald jumping off the page, and I'm seeing J.D. Salinger jumping off the page. What I loved about talking with you is the free association of people who are critically, you know, influential in your life just keeps coming, and you keep connecting the dots between all of these people. But one of the first quotes was Carl Jung. Let me see. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there's any reaction, both are transformed.
Yes.
Love that.
That's right. That's absolutely, but that's the point of having a shop. So while I can sit around and make bagels, that's nice. But when it gets to be me and other people interacting, that's better. And when it's a neighborhood interacting, that's amazing. And the thing that is wonderful about the bagel thing, which is real similar in pizza. So one of the things that Home Slice did really well or understood was that pizza is amazing because it typically is at least two people going, let's share this thing, right? The underbelly truth of that is love and hope and joy, right? With a bagel, it is not so often that you share the same bagel that you're having, right? But the ability to take this bagel that you love and go, have one of these, right?
You say that again, Phil, because
that happens with bagels all the time.
Can you just say
with a bagel? It is the connection, the ability for a human being to look at another human being and go, eat this.
Yeah.
Eat this. And back to what I want. So the greatest compliment I ever hear when people eat one of the bagels is, I didn't know it could be like this.
Boy, don't you love hearing that?
It is, because it's that same thing of being blown away by what your expectation is and what it really is.
You're really altering people's perception of reality when something that they take for granted a bagel, a simple pizza, whatever, that, and when someone says, I didn't realize there was a whole other level or a whole other dimension of this platonic thing here, and I'm tapping into it now as a result of this moment.
Right, which is why Jung is dead on the money, right?
Yeah.
And this is why Ella fits, and why, and for me, and I keep coming back to this because it's true. There is not one thing that I know or one thing that I do that wasn't informed by somebody else somewhere being kind to me and showing me something. All of it. Now, granted, what I did with it and how I understood it, that's me, right?
Yeah.
But it was simply because somebody like you or John Arena or Ella Fitzgerald or whoever took the moment to say to me, okay, I'm going to show you this thing. Back to the woman who taught me the cheesecake. Okay, I'm going to show you this thing, right? And so with Philadelphia, and you're far more traveled than I, and so you probably know better than I. In Philadelphia, the ability to witness and testify at the same time is available and apparent in how people in Philadelphia feel about local food, right? Not only do they love it, they want to talk to somebody about it.
Yeah.
Right? And they want somebody to listen to them talking about it.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm sure every city has their version of that, but Philly definitely has a cultural identity built around its sandwiches, its cheesesteaks and roast pork and pretzels and bagels.
And bagels. And all of that coming down to, here's this guy who does this thing. I think it's pretty awesome. I think you will too, right? So when I was working with Danny at Angelo's, his mixer was broken for a month, and I got to go use the mixer at Sarcone's Bakery, 4 doors down on 9th.
Famous bakery, yeah.
With the bakery with the ovens that are about 90 years old.
Yeah.
Where the mixer is like older than me. And it's, like, that's the best. That is such a Philadelphia story. Okay, you need a mixer, so use the mixer, right? I mean, like, because it's in the neighborhood, it's in the family. It's good.
Well, before I forget, so I want to get back to the bagel now. So in terms of method, technique, because people are going to want to know, a few things still to go. Number one, we'll finish the technique. So let's talk about that. Then I want to talk about what it's going to sell for and what else are you going to serve at the shop.
So the mother into the biga does a 12-hour at least into the mix with a bench rest and then a form and then another 12-hour.
12 hours at ambient room temperature or
no, cold ferment.
The cold ferment, okay.
Cold ferment.
Fermentation, retarding, yeah.
Yep. Come out of the cold ferment, give it about a half hour, and then you're boiling for about 30 seconds on each side. You're coming out of the boil. The boil has baking soda in the water. I do treat the pH with that. Does the 30 second, comes out and gets topped, if it's going to get topped, into a bucket with a shake. And then onto a bagel board that's been soaked, cedar board burlap,
old school,
upside down, into an oven that's roughly 400 and a little bit more, but under 410.
Is it a deck or is it a revolving carousel?
No, at this point it's my straight oven, but not a revolver, a straight oven. But I've got baking steels laid into it, so the board is going on top of the baking steel. It's doing 5 minutes, and then it gets flipped onto the baking steel. So it goes in upside down on the board.
Yeah.
Does 5 minutes flipped onto the steel, and it does a remaining 15 minutes, give or take. I mean, it's a 20-minute total cook at about 400 degrees for a 4.5-ounce piece of dough that's at about a 36-hour ferment.
When you think about not only the thought that went into all this, but the work, the physical work, that when you take this simple bagel, from now on, anytime somebody takes a bite of a bagel, think about, in this case, it's really, extensive artisan, but even at the most fundamental level, all these different steps that we never think about,
right?
That transform flour and a piece of wheat into this beautiful stirrup-shaped little roll. that we call a bagel. No, and then people go, what is it about bagels? Well, I mean, it's just bread, but it's not just bread. There's a whole backstory, series of transformations, and
Yeah.
changes that take place in that product before it hits your mouth.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
plus, now you're adding in also your blood, sweat, and tears, and your
Right.
team, and the energy that you guys are bringing to it. So, which means I'm saying all this. I'm thinking,
Right.
how much is this damn bagel going to cost me there by the time I get it? And are you going to just sell them as plain bagels? Or are you going to serve sandwiches? You're going to have some schmears, some lox, or what?
I'll do. So I think the bagel itself is a $2 bagel. Currently, I believe that's a $2 bagel.
Uh-huh.
I believe a bagel and a schmear will get you to about like a straight plain schmear. So the schmear that I make, I take cream cheese and I whip it with goat milk and I whip it with the brine from fresh mozzarella, which does an amazing thing to the texture and the aeration and the salt.
Yeah, great idea.
Plus,
you're the second person I've talked to in the last week who's using the brine from the mozzarella, in a second product.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It is such a, it feels so good to use. I mean, like it can be used for everything. So like, I think for that sort of thing, you're looking at about $3.50, somewhere in there.
It's pretty reasonable, yeah.
Yeah, for a schmear that is whipped up with like roasted poblano pepper or roasted long hots are preferable, or fresh cherries, or a totally tarted up schmear will be more like a $4.25 total.
Uh-huh.
I'll do bagels, I'll do schmears, I'll do bagel sandwiches like a bacon, egg, and cheese, or a sausage, egg, and cheese.
Wow, now you're adding some more complexity to the shop. You're going to have a griddle there and everything else.
I'll make normal bagels that are topped and plains, and I'll do a pumpernickel and I'll do a rye. I'll do bialys probably once a week because my father and because greasers on Delancey is important to me. But I'll also do
bialy day once a week, which we destination day, yeah.
Right. I'll do a cinnamon raisin that I'm now very happy with, and I'll do a Cooper Sharp cheese with roasted long hots in a bagel. I am the only person I know who does this. And you'll see the cheddar jalapeno happen in Austin all the time, and it's around there. And Asiago is a pretty standard one.
So what is that long hot you're talking about?
So it's an Italian long hot pepper.
Oh, it's a pepper. Okay. Uh-huh.
Right. So it's a very, very spicy Italian market pepper.
Wow.
I roast the peppers. Those go into the secondary dough, right? Along with, after the banks rest, I then fold in cubes of Cooper Sharp cheddar cheese.
So that's all in the dough itself, in the bagel, baked into the bagel.
Yeah. It is astounding. Like, it is a ridiculous bagel. I'll do schmears with the roasted long hot. I'll do schmears with peaches that have been sauteed, and I'll do nutty things like that. I'll do a bagel sandwich with roast pork from Esposito's Porchetta 2 blocks up the road.
Which is nice that you have all these resources right around the corner. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
I'll use their roast pork. I'll use their roast beef. I'll make a Cubano. I'll do a Reuben. I will talk to Mike's Barbecue, which is also on 11th and more.
That's a hot new place too. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay, so if you're watching, Fred, Mike. So if I can convince them every once in a while to make pastrami.
Yeah.
And we can make pastrami Reubens, like, why not? And for me, the reason to start a neighborhood is for the neighborhood, right? For everybody to work with everybody else, for everybody
really
to
communal
be able to raise everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm about 2 months away. I'm hoping September 1st.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you budgeted into the plan any time to sleep? Because you got an awful lot on the plate here.
No, but I don't have time to sleep, but I have really good partnership. And one of the parts of the story that's really exciting is the guy who was the director of operations for Home Slice Pizza, who started out as a bartender when it opened in 2005, Nano Whedon. Nano's a Philly kid.
Ah,
Like he grew up, I think, in Mount Airy or somewhere around there. He has recently moved back to town, and he is
nice.
working with me. We are working together
Neat.
to open the bagel shop that I'm talking about. So it is this incredible connection from 2005, where we both were on the sidewalk painting the booths that would end up in the shop before it opened. And 16 years later, we're walking through the shell of the shop going, okay, so how can we do it this time better? Which is every day.
I feel like I'm one of the last Philly kids who has not been pulled back into the Philly cauldron. But who knows? The story's not ended yet. Who knows? I may get there. Well, listen, this has been amazing journey, and we'll get you back again. Maybe around the time you open, maybe we can do something, or maybe get you back when you're up and actually in operation, even before you open, and do a demo. And we can videotape you actually showing people the process, making from start to finish a bagel.
I would love
to get that if we can do that, Phil.
I would love that.
And for those who want to reach out to you, I know that number one, they may want to write to you. Best way to write to you would be what email address or
P Korshak at gmail.com.
PKORSHAK.
That's right.
P Korshak at what was it? AOL?
At Gmail.
At gmail.com. Okay, gmail.com. So write to Philip there. When you're in Philly, if you're not already there, but you're going to now have to go to Philly to get one of these bagels starting in September. It's at 10th and
Morris.
10th and Morris down in the Italian market is not just 2 blocks. It's a big chunk of Philadelphia. So so you can make a day of it just walking from shop to shop to shop.
Yep.
And it's going to be called Korshak's Bagels. Sounds like it's going to be an amazing place, a destination place. And
Korshak Bagels, we're all in this together.
And I'm so thrilled that you were able to share all this with us. It's been great to see you again. As always, it's not the last conversation we will have. We'll get you back on a regular basis. And I don't know. I want to listen to some music with you. So we got to get. We've got to get Ella Fitzgerald up next time. Next time we'll play some Ella behind us. And Peggy Lee. All right. Yeah. Well, she's phenomenal. But Ella is really my go-to person. I think the greatest voice of modern music.
The songbook is everything. Yeah. But we'll talk Ella.
That's a lot more to talk about here on Pizza Talk, because Pizza Talk is not just about pizza. It's about how it all hangs together. And Phil, thanks so much for being part of this today. We'll see all of you back on the next episode of Pizza Talk. Good luck with the opening. I'll be tracking that all the way. Thanks. Bye-bye.